Hi there. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. In this episode, my guest is founder of Grow Good. He's an international speaker and he's been helping business leaders on a B Corp certification. He's also author of To Be or Not to Be. He's also a host of a podcast, the Be Better podcast. In this episode, we talk about many different topics around the B Corp certification. Tim shared insight how companies globally looking to be more socially and environmentally responsible. He talks about impact on a business and also impact on our people with the certification. And he also walks us through step-by-step process to be B Corp certified. And also he talks about what kind of benefit people can expect once they have a B Corp certification. So without any further ado, please welcome my guest, Tim Jones. Hey guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is someone far away, very special, Tim Jones. Tim, this B Corp, discussion we in front of us. It looks like it's gaining a lot of momentum. So, where I'm in Canada, not many people, know so much about it. So I'm looking forward to learning from you. Looking forward to what's involved in it. So thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, no worries. Yeah, thanks for having me. B Corp. It's been an interesting journey. I first connected to the B Corp movement in 2014. Mm-hmm. And then there was possibly, I think it was about 1,200 to 1,500 B Corps around the world. Now we've just gone over, I think we're almost at 6,000 globally. There's about 1,000, the UK has now hit 1,000 B Corps. I think we're at probably 2,000 to 3,000-ish in the sort of North American context. Mm-hmm. So having been involved in the movement since 2014, so I'm dialing in from New Zealand. In 2014 there were 2 B Corps in New Zealand. Wow. So with that context, now we're almost at 100 in New Zealand. You go, wow, that's phenomenal. But when you do the maths, globally 6,000-ish B Corps is only about 0.01 or 2% of businesses, like limited for-profit companies, but about 0.01 or 2% of companies are currently B Corp. So whilst for me, it certainly feels like B Corp is everywhere, and people like yourself are seeing it, it is still really, it's not even 1% of businesses doing it. So that's why possibly your listeners haven't heard of it.
Yeah. So let's step back. So the audience are watching, business leaders who are watching us, they're listening to are watching us. If you can just give us a little bit of summary, like what does it make a B Corp and what's involved in it?
Yeah, totally. So B Corp certification it's kind of like a fair trade certification, but for your business, for your entire business. Okay. So B Corp certification, if you certify as a B Corp, like my business is, you have basically been independently verified to be operating at the highest levels of transparency and accountability when it comes to your social and environmental footprint as a business. So I think increasingly globally, certainly at the big end of town, if you're a listed company, there is pretty much, I would hazard to guess, most Western democratized nations, you are now having to report on your emissions. B Corp is kind of like the reason why I like it is it's more than just environmental sustainability. So currently it looks at how your business performs across its governance, how you treat your workers, your community impact, your environmental impact, and then your impact on your customers. So it's quite a broad look at how your business is performing rather than just, I think there's a lot of bigger companies in particular kind of, maybe one day in the future, we'll stop making as many emissions as we are today. And we can make a pledge on that. And that's kind of all we need to do. Whereas B Corp is a bit more, I don't really like the word holistic, but it is holistic because it looks at, it's not just, we're doing really great on our environmental stuff, but don't ask us about the child labor making our products because that's a bit awkward. It's kind of like you have to be doing more than just the environmental stuff. Not that I'm saying, looking after the planet isn't important, but that's why I kind of really connected with it.
So this defining the standards, what direction to go. So I take it that from the website, the B Corp is a global organization. Is made of a lot of companies, like I'm not doubting their credibility. I'm simply saying these are global organization that has a lot of scholars, or a lot of people as independent people joining it, right?
Totally. So my company is a certified B Corporation. The company that, or the organization that runs the certification, is called B Lab. And some people get confused and they think it's like a competing certification framework, but it's not. So B Lab is a non-profit entity, and they design, run, update the certification framework. So B Lab North America, there's Sustainable Bay in South America, there's B Lab Europe, B Lab Australia, New Zealand. There's sort of regional hubs all around the world. So B Lab then has at arm's length from them the independent auditors. So to become a B Corp currently, you need to take this, it's an initial self-assessment, and we can get links to people if they're interested to go and have a look at it. And to go and take this initial assessment is completely free. So you can go and have a look at the assessment and see how your business is performing against this global framework. And that framework is created, curated, updated by B Lab.
Gotcha. And
they work with, what has gone in to create that framework. Like I wouldn't even know where to start, it's like, and then there's algorithms behind it where, if you open up this question, it opens up this question over here. Like some very, very smart people have got together in a room. And I guess what they've tried to do is go, if you had a perfect company that was looking after, it was transparent in terms of how it operated around its ethics, transparency, and how it reported what it's doing beyond just financial reporting, which is really your only metric of reporting for a limited company, or an LLC in any country. If it was treating its workers with utmost respect and sharing the wealth with them, if it was a really good corporate citizen in its local community and was supporting charities and volunteering and engaged and hiring locally, if it was, looking at its environmental impact, like if we created that perfect company, and then how would we measure your performance against it? That's kind of what they've done. So to get the certification, you go through this initial self-assessment, completely free to go and have a play with it. And currently you need to score 80 out of 200 points on this assessment. And once you think you're over the 80 mark, you submit this. If you want to get the certification, you submit it, and then you get basically sit in a queue and you wait to get hold of an auditor from B Lab, and they then go through your working. And that's when you get the audit, and they will go, okay, well, Gurmeet, you say here that you're doing this. Can you explain to me how you do that? And then you might go, oh yeah, actually, maybe we don't do that. Okay, we don't get those points. Or you go, yeah, that's exactly what we do. Yeah, great, you get those points. So that's kind of the high level process.
I got you. So it looks like a very complex, the process. So let's talk from a business owner standpoint. Like a lot of business are watching the, so if somebody running a company, somebody building a company, do I pick what I want to be applied, like what environment, what risk, where do I want to be responsible socially? Does it have to be economically? And what do I want to do good in a world? Do I pick, or is the frameworks can I impose them? No, you need to meet every single criteria in this area.
So that's a really interesting and a loaded question, because currently to be a B Corp, you just need to score 80 out of 200 points. And to a degree, like if you're more focused on your social impact and you really care about your community and hiring locally and giving back to your local community, you could score a lot of points in that section. And then on the environment section, you might go, like for me, I'm a service business. My environmental footprint is minimal. I work from the spare room in my home here. I rarely take my car anywhere because I'm mainly working on Zoom. So like my environmental emissions are next to nothing. So I kind of don't care so much about that because I'm not really making an impact. And so at the minute to get B Corp currently, you're either doing okay across all 5, or you're doing kind of really well on 2 of the 5 sections. However, this has been one of the criticisms from people external to the movement, and also some of the current B Corps who kind of said, well, you could kind of, you could really concentrate on 2 areas, do really well, but be underperforming in other areas. So from 2024, it's looking like that there's now going to be a new standards framework where there will be a minimum requirement you have to meet across 8 areas, rather than kind of just do what you can to score 80 out of 200 across the 5 areas. And it is interesting. I'm about to explore this, and we're going to make some content on our own sort of YouTube channel and podcast to work out, well, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? So in some ways, I think, like I say, we're at 0.01 or 2% of companies are currently B Corp certified. By making the standards harder, are we going to potentially lose some people who it could have been achievable with a little bit of work, but then once you're in, you kind of want to get better, so you get that increase of the good that you're doing over time. Whereas now, like, the benchmarks can be quite high, and are we going to lose some people who kind of go, you know what, it's just too hard, and I'm just not that maybe I'm not that interested in the community side of things. I just really care about environmental stuff. I don't know. There's no right or wrong, I guess. Well, we'll soon find out. But I think there's merits to either way. Yeah.
Very interesting. So businesses who go for certification, Tim, what sort of benefit do you see for the company? Like, where do they see? Yeah, definitely everybody wants to do good, but they have to run a business as well. People have their own certification, industry certification, could be ISO and all that kind of stuff. So definitely more initiative. They have to see the time and effort invested into it and what's the return for them. So where you see that they reap the rewards?
Yep, 100%. So we typically are finding businesses are coming under pressure from four main groups. So employees increasingly want to know that the job that they're doing is creating some kind of meaningful contribution to the planet and community. There's a really, it's an amazing statistic because it's so awful. I think it was from about 2017 or 2018. It's called YouGov. So it's like the British government go out and do surveys, of the business community. A YouGov survey said it was about 30% of employees felt that their job provided them with no meaning and was more than likely contributing to destroying the planet. So,
Very
is that in
interesting.
you? Yeah, it's kind of like, well, and globally we kind of talk about the mental health crisis, and for me, I think it's really clear that people have a desire to do meaningful work that they can see how it's contributing to making stuff better. And quite often that's just a really good place to start, is to remember and work out who the human is at the end of your value chain and what good are you providing for them. So employees are definitely looking for more. They want to know how I'm contributing to more good. Customers, increasingly, all things being equal, customers are looking at how you're making your product and where does it come from, or who do you employ if you're a service company, and how do you operate, and they want to know that you're not causing harm through what you're doing. So increasingly, particularly consumer brands, health and beauty, food and beverage, specifically, but more broadly, that consumer brand sector. If you're a natural health brand and you're claiming that you've got all these natural health benefits, if you're not a B Corp in the near future, you're going to be one of the few, because almost all the other ones are going down that route. So yeah, definitely customers. Supply chain, again, depending. If you're a customer facing, sort of B2C brand, then it's customer driven. But however, still, supply chain is another big driver. Classic example, we're talking to a company about maybe helping them with their B Corp. They make an extract from a fruit product. So they take the fruit, they take an extract, they put it into a powder, they sell that to a nutrition company who put it into the product. They then sell it through distributors. Their UK distributor has now had the UK retailer come to the distributor saying, our customers want to know where all of the extract products come from. So it's come all the way down to the guy who's making, like, no one even knows his company name. Like he's not a brand. Like, he's providing a small part of the product. The customer wants to know what his business is up to in terms of their social and environmental footprint. So we're definitely seeing that. And I think this is going to be really driven particularly by the emissions side of things. I'm hopefully talking at a conference in Sydney next year, and one of the topics they've got is, let me get it right, my scope 3 emissions are your scope 1 emissions. We need to talk. So all these big companies, so scope 3 emissions are basically emissions that you make by virtue of scope 1 emissions are emissions from your company owned vehicles and offices. Scope 2 emissions are from your power bill, basically. So scope 3 is everything else that your business does, and that basically includes your supply chain. So if you're a supplier into any other company that is having to look at their environmental impacts, pretty soon they're going to be knocking on your door going, hey Gurmeet, I need to know what you're doing because someone's asking me. So we're definitely seeing that supply chain pressure. And then the last one is investor pressure. Increasingly, private equity, venture capital, mainstream banks, when this stuff hits New Zealand, it's a thing. We're typically probably 10 years behind on a lot of things, 5 if we're lucky. So we've got 2 major, retail banks here in New Zealand who now have got sustainably backed lending for small to medium business. So basically, if you want to go and get an EV, or you want to put solar panels on your building, they will give you better terms on that loan because you're creating a social or environmental impact. And so, yeah, depending on the sector that you're in, and the various pressures, but yeah, some businesses are finding all four of those are putting pressure on them to step up. You might be just finding it's one of those four. But this is the challenge, balancing the purpose and the profit is really, really tricky. But increasingly, this is going to be, the thing that everyone is going to be looking at your business around. It's like, it's not just going to be enough to be a good business that has good profit. People are going to start looking at you, but how are you making that profit? And actually, where does the profit go? And how have you cut corners on this? Where is the slave labor in your supply chain? Because increasingly you're going to be found out, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Well, from a talk about building a brand or from a competitive advantage. I mean, this one helps quite a bit for businesses. I can see that you gain competitive advantage if all your competition is not, and you are, and definitely you gain a little bit of competitive advantage.
100%.
And in terms of building a brand, definitely, all those social awareness programs, they build brand, and definitely, it shows what you stand for.
Yeah,
okay.
Totally.
What
is just sorry? Well, and just on that, it's like you hear the phrase, go woke, go broke, but there's actually some really, and again, we can get links to all this. There's compelling data that specifically B Corp certificate. Like if you just want to make more money, there is actually compelling data that B Corp can help you do that. So during the pandemic, B Corps outperformed the market in terms of employee growth, general survivorship, and even like 2/3 of all B Corps increased revenue in the middle of a global pandemic. And there's data from the University of Ghent. They did which is in Belgium. They did a panel data set study of all European B Corps that certified between 2012 and 2018. And basically their data empirically shows that B Corp certification positively impacts turnover growth rates 1 year pre versus 1 year post certification. And the reason for that is, I think, you get more engaged employees who actually care about what you're doing. You have customers who become like true, absolute fans of what you're doing because they feel like they're a part of doing some good, because you're kind of doing the good for them. Your supply chain will potentially, either you'll be kept in the supply chain or you might get better terms in your supply chain. And again, the investors want to support brands and be able to say, hey, look, we're putting money in these brands. They're a good company, but they're doing a good return. So there's solid business reasons for doing it. But you kind of also mentioned it at the beginning. It's like you actually just feel pretty good at night going to bed, knowing that, I've actually done some good for the planet and the people.
Yeah, no, interesting. But I'm trying to understand it, Tim, is, even before B Corp, many, many years ago, businesses had this option with the nonprofit organization. I know a lot of my colleagues that did support a lot of nonprofit organizations. They did a lot of, to different causes on a social programs. So, where does this one, has a little bit of edge over businesses going voluntarily, doing that good work, or funding some charities or some other social program? Where does one take a little bit of edge over that?
Yeah, so I mean, they're not kind of mutually exclusive. And on the B Corp assessment, you would get, currently under the current model, you would get points recognition for that volunteering work, for those donations, whether they were in-kind donations, if you're a service company, pro bono time that you do for a charity. So you'd get recognition for that. And in fact, because there's actually kind of two parts to the assessment. The standard assessment is a measure of your operational goodness. So whilst you're delivering whatever your product or service your company delivers, how do we treat our staff? How do we treat the community, et cetera, et cetera. But beyond that, there's a thing called an impact business model, which is if you can prove you've gone out of your way to create more positive social or environmental impact than you are legally required to do, you will unlock an impact business model. So Patagonia, the clothing company, outdoor company, they're possibly one of the most well-known B Corps. They unlock impact business models, for example, under the environment section, because they make some of their clothing from recycled plastic, which is clearly above and beyond, because they don't have to do that, but by doing that, they're reducing the amount of virgin plastic that they're using, which has a positive, that's a positive environmental outcome. So things like that, under the charity stuff, if you're giving a good amount of money, you would unlock what's called a design to give impact business model, which would give you like potentially quite a few points. So but I think I kind of talk about this on sort of four levels of purpose within a company, like giving some money, donating some time. Like it's quite a lazy way to do good, and theoretically your core business could be a terrible business that's destroying the planet and killing people, you know what I mean? Like fundamentally, the business could be not that great in terms of what humanity and the planet needs, but you kind of salve your conscience by, well, yeah, but we give some money to charity. And equally, you know, not all charities are created equal. When you actually look at, you know, which charities are actually doing some good and where does the money go? So there's a lot in that. And then obviously you know, the next risk is the volunteering days, where typically, in fact, we're just helping a tech company with their B Corp, and you know, we got to the part where it talked about volunteering days, and they said, oh yeah, we really struggled to get people to come to the volunteering days. And I said, let me guess, you do tree planting. He's like, yeah, how did you guess? I said, well, because everyone does tree planting, but you've got a bunch of developers and coders who generally don't like being in the outdoors and generally don't like sunlight. So why would you expect any of them to want to go and plant a tree, which they don't like doing? And so, you know, the conversation with them was like, why don't you look at creating like a development program where the developers maybe give their time back to help someone perhaps with an intellectual disability or someone who's disadvantaged to maybe get a job doing coding and developing. And a couple of the coders were on the call and they're like, that's really cool. Like, we totally give our time to do that. And so there's risks with the volunteering side, because having worked for a couple of not-for-profits, you get these well-meaning corporates who come in, they do the job that you do professionally, they come in and do it really badly, they don't really enjoy doing it, and then you have to redo the job that they've just done. Whereas, you know, this is kind of morphing into the more truly purpose-driven business. It's like, well, if the core product or service that you do is truly solving a human or planet-based problem, and you're doing it in a way that's kind of only creating good, well, then you kind of don't really need to be just giving the money to the charity. But that's not to say that, you know, don't give money to any charities, because clearly some of them are really worthy and important. But again, this is, you know, if you went to business school or you started a business, you know, for the last 50, 100 years, it's just been about make money. Like that's your number one metric, is trade solvently, trade legally, we're good to go. But I think we're realizing that that's not good for us as business owners, and it's created a lot of, you know, problems more broadly for society, communities, you know, and the environment.
Well, definitely makes sense to put some standards on it, right? You're doing that anyway. You know, why not put some standards on it and get some recognition, right? So very interesting. So how does the process work, Tim, on this? Yeah, do definitely, you know, you want to get certified, and let's say you want to. So is it an ongoing evaluation or just a one-time certification and kind of stays with you? Because and, you know, your initiative may change, or your interest may change, and as a business as you move forward.
Totally. Yeah. So currently, let's say if you certified in 2022, you would then recertify in 2025. So it's currently a 3-year recertification cycle. So yeah, you get certified 3-year recertification. That I don't know, that might change again with this 2024 update. I haven't heard anything specifically about that, but it's been 3 years for quite a while now. You know, what we sort of say to people is that, you know, year one, just get certified. And you might have to do some work to actually meet that minimum threshold, even on the current one. You know, you might not be. We specialize in helping companies get through the B Corp assessment, and we have quite a few who come to us, they've given it a go, they're stuck at 50, 60, 70 points. It's like, we just don't know how to finish it. We just don't understand the questions to be able to get it. So yeah, year one, we just say, look, go and get B Corp and get the recognition for the good that you're doing, and be a part of this growing global community. And then, you know, as soon as you're in, the clock's ticking. You've got 3 years to try and become a better B Corp. And the assessment tool is really useful to also run a gap analysis. So you can kind of, you can download it download your full assessment as a spreadsheet. And then you can basically rank it by points scored, points available, and go, right, well, where didn't we score points? And then, you know, get your team together and go, well, what's important to us? What's important to our customers? What's important to our suppliers? Like, where should we look to do more good? And then, yeah, you can use it as like an impact guide to go, well, where do we want to be in 3 years' time when we recertify? Got
you. So as we coming out of COVID, I know a lot of CEOs, you know, my colleagues, they're looking to scale up the companies, they're looking to build again. So for them to understand how big is the undertaking of this initiative, if there's some place, listen, I definitely want to scale a company. I will need to get back to revenue level where I was before. I need to do these 5 things to get there. And then at the same time, if I want to take on a B Corp certification, how big is this initiative? How much work they need? It's going to add it to the plate so they can plan it.
Yep, it's definitely typically a chunky project. It's kind of hard to say, because, you know, some companies have been behaving like a B Corp for the last 20 years and they just didn't know it. and they turn up, they get through the assessment, and it's pretty easy to do. Then you've got the other extreme where we haven't been operating like a B Corp at all, but we want to, and that's going to take time and effort, and it's going to take education, and it's going to take bringing the team on the journey to go, hey, no, we don't do it that way, remember, anymore. We need to start thinking this way, and that culture change, that can take time. And then there's kind of like the middle group where we really, really, really want to be like a B Corp, and we're not that far away from it, but it's going to take a little bit of homework. And so, yeah, depending on where you are on the spectrum, but in general, it's a project, and you'll need a project lead. We're really dogmatic about getting the whole team involved, even at the highest level. So getting everyone aware of what you're doing, what the process is, why are you doing it, what do you want to get out of it, just getting that buy-in from the team is critical, because then you've kind of nailed that employee engagement side of it. But like I say, really that's kind of our offering is like we're experts at helping you navigate the assessment. Like, we can get you through the assessment. We've got templates and things that can really help you speed up, but there's always going to be some homework that you're going to go and have to go and do. And it's really it's like a piece of string, and that piece of string kind of goes in and out and changes and it's like you might, and again, it also depends on the size and complexity of your company. Like, if you're a 1,000 employee company with multiple locations, it's going to take you longer. If you're a small company with like 10 to 20 employees and they're all virtual employees working from home, pretty easy. So it's a rubbish answer to a great question.
No, it's just trying to understand. And where do you see, if you can share some of the experiences, Tim, where do you see people falling short? They take on an initiative, hey, listen, I want to take on that, and then it doesn't go anywhere, right? Where do you see some of the blind spots? Where do people fail generally?
The big thing we find, well, I guess like probably 2 or 3 things would be, the first one is just making the time for it. Like I say, it is a project. You need to have someone who's actually driving it, and it can become one of those things that just keeps dropping. You get to Friday and it's like, hey, okay, we'll do it again next week. And then suddenly you're 6 months down and you're no further. The other part of it is just understanding the assessment. They certainly did not win any plain English language awards for how they phrase a lot of the questions. And just sometimes I've gone through the assessment hundreds of times, and even sometimes I look at it and go, what the hell, what were they asking on this one again? Oh yeah, I think it's this. So those would be the areas we find people need the help with. It's like just almost being held accountable, and then just some help to understand what the questions are, and what are they really asking here.
The timing is always critical piece, right? So nobody has enough hours in a day, right? So definitely,
exactly.
I think that's where a lot of these initiatives fail, that simply not allocating proper, or underestimating how much time it's going to take, and it's taking more than what you estimated, and now you're stuck again, right? So it just estimation of the time is going to take to complete 100%. The project. I think that's where probably that the people 100%. Struggle.
It's like if you had other major initiatives, I would suggest that you don't add this to the mix, because if you're going through a phase of transition, you'd probably want to get the other stuff nailed first, because that might also then, well, having said that, it might be worth having a quick look at the assessment, because it might influence how you implement other stuff, because again, depending how where your business is currently operating, if you're kind of like what would be described as the legacy business, where you've been operating on a purely for profit, that's like our only motivation, and you're trying to turn the super tank around to be slightly less profit driven and more purpose driven, quite often you've just got embedded systems and processes and ways of doing things, and again, it's like, okay, we need to, and if you've got a board, it's like, hey, well, the leadership team needs to take it to the board, and whereas if you're a lean kind of more startup where you're owner operator, you don't have a board, or even you're a scale up business where you don't have to, and you're the CEO or the owner operator, and you don't need to take it to a board to get approval. You can kind of just look at the assessment and go, that's a really cool way of doing it. We're just going to do that from today. And it's like, hey, Gurmeet, can you make that happen? You're the head of HR. Like, just rewrite that policy. Make it so. Do it now. So there's a lot of variability depending on who you are and how you're currently operating.
Very interesting. Yeah, definitely. I would assume that if it's going to take that, I have to review my all process and strategies, how I've been running a business. Those are big changes, right? Those are not easily changed, right? Definitely a lot of communication, a lot of cultural changes, a lot of mindset changes. Those are bigger than taking. Definitely, I think that's. I would assume that people struggle with that, because people struggle regardless. making a changes to any process people struggle with, right? Now you're making it for some reason, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you see in a company who sells more of a manufacturing company, product companies or services company, either one of them take more, more of these initiatives, or either certain industries that are more keen on this? What are your thoughts on that?
Like I say, our current client mix is a bit of everything. We've got professional services, service-based companies, tech companies, manufacturing, retail. Retail is the one that actual retailers, we're not seeing much there yet, other than companies that have a product that they might then have their own retail store, if that makes sense. Like Allbirds are a B Corp. Well, they have their own Allbirds store, but they're kind of really a manufacturing company with a, you know what I mean? They're not like a true retail or like a chain of retail. Like they're not just the retail chain of stores. So yeah, pretty much across all sectors. And like I said, I think a lot of it is coming down to mindset and intent of the leadership. It's like we've got to a point where we think this is important. That being said, like I said, fast-moving consumer good brands, like pretty soon, if you are, like a natural health, kind of consumer-facing brand, if you're not B Corp in the near future, stand by, because pretty much all your competitors are going to have the B Corp, and people will just look at your brand and go, "So what are you hiding? Why haven't you done this?" Because these 10 other brands in your sector or in your product competitor lines. I mean, because if you look in the UK, there's it's sort of a fairly well-known supermarket brand called Waitrose. It's kind of probably a little bit closer to sort of Whole Foodsy style, North American style, kind of like, it's premium retailer. And there's another company called WH Smith, who are kind of like a news agents. You go get magazines and sweets and stuff like that. So March is B Corp month. And I was in the UK this last March, and both of them had in-store activations with like end of aisle and in some cases whole aisles of these brands are B Corp certified. So, wow. Definitely seeing that the retailers are seeing it as an opportunity to kind of like, hey, look, we look good because look at all these B Corp brands. And the B Corp brands were clearly using it as a differentiator to say, if you're going to buy chocolate, well, you should buy this chocolate because we are a better performing chocolate, in terms of social environment than this other brand. So, yeah, I think consumer brands, it's going to be pretty soon. It's going to be a table stakes situation. And then for other areas, there's still in certain sectors, there are still no companies that are certified. So there's the opportunity for you to be the first in a few, in a few, potentially in your area or in your sector. And no one can ever take that away from you. It's like to be able to say, we were the world's first B Corp X. It's like, that's your, and there's value in that.
Yeah, and I would assume the service companies are probably a little bit easier to deal with some of the stuff, right? So especially nonprofit organizations or any other service company, there's probably easier to get it done than product companies, right?
Certainly, yeah. There's less. There's probably less risk. Yeah, like if you're making a product and you've got a supply chain and it's been manufactured offshore. Yeah, there's a depth of questions. So yeah, two things it's worth noting. So currently not-for-profits generally cannot certify as a B Corp unless you've got a limited company trading structure, and that's not very common. And there is no one assessment. So there's about 70 different assessments, and that is dependent on your geographic location, how many employees you have, and what sector you're in. So a company with 10,000 employees that's a manufacturer is going to have a completely different assessment to my business, which has got 0 employees as a service-based business. So again, the smart people behind the scenes have kind of worked out, well, what are the existential risks that a large manufacturing company has versus a small service company? So as a manufacturing company, there will be specific questions on your supply chain and the water use in your supply chain and the emissions and the waste of your supply chain. So not just what you're doing, but your contract manufacturers, like what's their performance? And that's the one area that across the board, we find most people don't know, is they don't know anything about their supply chain. It's kind of, well, we buy all our products off this agent, Gurmeet. He seems like a really nice guy, and I don't know where he buys any of our stuff from.
Yeah.
And so a lot of companies we're finding are going to having that conversation with the, that agent or that product supplier to go, look, I now need to know where you're getting your stuff from, and I need to have a conversation with them. And, there might be some changes coming up.
So
if they don't meet the performance.
Especially when you bring in a product from overseas, right? So
Yep.
so you have no standards there, right? They can do whatever they want to do as long as supply you by use a component or or services, right, or product. So this could be one of those standards that internationally impose on those countries if they're going to certify with that.
Yep, totally. And like I said, we're definitely seeing that with a lot of the consumer product brands that we've just been working with recently. They all recognize that they don't know enough about their supply chain, and they are now pretty much all of them embarking on the project to go and have that conversation and to say, look, no judgment right now, but we just need to know who are you and how do you operate, and then we'll start making a call as to look, actually, because increasingly it's the reputational risk for your business. There was a case here a few years ago, it must have been about 2018. We've got a big department store over here. It's kind of like a mini Target type setup called Farmers, and a mum wrote them a letter to say, hey, I'd just like to know where you get your clothes from, like, could you just give me a breakdown? And she got sent a letter back from their head of procurement or whatever saying, I'm sorry madam, but that information is classified. Well, no, I'm now imagining 6-year-old children in Bangladesh making those clothes. I'm not imagining it's good if you're not going to tell me. And again, increasingly, the risk is coming there. If you're a product manufacturer, but you're not doing the manufacturing, if it's happening offshore in most likely in Asia, people are increasingly wanting to know. It's, well, tell me about that. And again, there's a company, I probably can't name them because they're not there yet, but there's a company we've been working with. They manufacture in China, but they have trained the staff in the factory in China in artisanal leather work, resurrecting old ways of doing leather work. And so it's not like mass produced by people who don't want to be working there. It's like they have worked with this company to help upskill and train a group of people in a lost art of leather making. Like that's a cool story that their customers buy into, as opposed to, don't ask me about where this stuff's made, but the product looks good, as more companies are leading with that, it's just going to put more pressure on your business when people start going, hey, that's really cool what they're doing. What are you doing? Tell me your story. And it's kind of like, I don't know where we get our stuff from.
do you see business making a different decision, to lose that competitive advantage? I think what I mean, let's say that, I'm producing something in Canada and there's a company overseas supply me a different product, and I find out they're not ethically complying with some of the stuff I'm cautious about. You think people switching, they're taking a business elsewhere, or they're switching around their vendors, just because somebody's not meeting those requirements?
I think we're going to see that more so. Like I say, it is always tough because the business still has to make money, and right now it's this real tough balance between wanting to do the right thing, and I think ultimately every human wants to get home at night and think, look, I've done as well as I can today with what I've got. And there's so much research that, just chasing the profit motive, it's not good for you as the individual. And it's not good for, you typically make poor decisions if you're just chasing the money outcome. I think increasingly we're on this verge of sort of, increasingly people just being more aware of what's actually happening in my business. And do you know what? I'm happy to lose a little bit of profitability to know that I'm helping these people over here, or to know that I'm getting a better outcome. But I think we're in this transition period again, where the next group of consumers coming through, the people who are going to have the money, will want to support that brand over this is cheap, but it's, don't ask me about where it's come from. I think there's always going to be a market for that. There's always going to be some people who just cannot afford the organic, grass-fed, beautiful, prime beef, and need to go and get a really poor quality burger from somewhere. But I think increasingly, all boats are rising, that, we're getting to higher thresholds of requirements. I think we're definitely seeing that, but I think it's going to be this interesting tension period over the next few years.
Do you ever wonder, or anything, that's so good and it gets so big, and there's always fallout of that, right? So you think this is B Corp organization getting so big, and we're where it's telling businesses how to run a business. You think a lot of business owners fear that, and they don't comply to that. Hey, now have a body that telling me what needs to be done, right? So
Yep.
how do I run a business when somebody's telling me what to do? I can make some decisions, right? Definitely when it gets bigger and bigger, right? Definitely it has a pros and cons.
Yep.
You ever worry that it can get so big?
Potentially. I mean, and that's potentially one of the risks with this new standards framework, is it's like, no, you have to meet this minimum criteria across these areas.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, they, from what I have seen of them, they look like basic criteria that you probably should be thinking about anyway. Like, actually, are we paying fair wages to our staff? Like, there's a lot of people that are having that conversation right now anyway, and with inflation happening, increasingly, certainly you look at the UK, I guess it's slightly different, UK, New Zealand, nursing staff, public sector workers say, look, we're not paid enough to live. That conversation is happening. Like I say, the measuring your waste and your emissions, that conversation is already happening. So I kind of think regulation is coming anyway, to a degree. B Corp is maybe just ahead of that curve. But again, I think we're going to get to a new normal of business in the near future, where if you're not on top of what your environmental impact is, how much waste do we actually make, and where does that waste go, and what actually happens to it? Like I say, I think increasingly this kind of stuff is just going to become business as usual, regardless of whether it's through B Corp or something else. I think increasingly, just people want to know what's actually happening. I think that there's lots of conversations, around energy supply globally, and people saying, well, we need to do more fracking because fracking is actually cheap and there's loads of that available in North America, so that we don't have to worry about, power coming from the Middle East or the raw materials coming from the Middle East. It's like, well, there's lots of complex conversations around that, because like in New Zealand is a classic example. We have basically stopped coal mining and extractive industries here, but we're importing it from China. So we can say we're clean because we're not doing it, but we're still buying it. We're just buying it from a dirtier place. And so, I think there's going to be a lot of this stuff coming through, lots of kind of smoke and mirrors around, well, what is actually better, what's not better. So I think there's going to be lots of regulations. There's going to be increasing expectations, like I say, from those sort of four core, groups of humans that your business needs, that you need to be thinking this way. And I kind of wonder whether in the sort of medium term, whether something like a basic B Corp assessment will be the minimum requirement to be in business. It's kind of like, you need to pay your staff a good wage. You need to be thinking about your environmental impact, and you need to be doing something in your community for you to have the mandate to exist as a business. And I think it's interesting for me, if you look back at, the early industrialists, like your Carnegies, your Cadburys, like they were that type of business. They built worker villages where the staff would have accommodation. They would feed them. They would ensure that they had a good standard of living. So it's not that long ago that some of the biggest, most successful companies actually did a lot of this stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting time to be in business. I mean, it's always an interesting time to be a business owner, but it just feels like particularly interesting right now with all this stuff going on in the world.
Yeah, no, I'm speaking about, the some of my colleagues, definitely, they're gonna say, I don't want somebody to tell me, how to pay my staff, right? So leave it in the market, right? Let me decide, right? So definitely, those are the conversations gonna have. I think this one opens up those conversations, but definitely, whether you're gonna let businesses decide or government's gonna decide, the minimum wages and all this stuff. That's totally different discussion. But I know,
totally.
In Canada, they're doing the same thing. They keep raising the minimum wages, where businesses, simply saying, "Hey, listen, what do I do with the cost, man? Who do I pass on the cost to?" Right?
But I think it's also interesting when you look at like the UK at the minute with all the power bills. It's a fine line between making profit and profiteering. And you look at some of the money that the big power companies in the UK are making. It's like, clearly there's some fat in the system there that you could actually give back to the consumer here. And again, if your only metric is how much money we're making, then you never want to look at us taking some profit off. And it's a hard, like I say, we've been conditioned through business schools and life in general, Reagan based economics, Thatcher economics, look after yourself, just make as much money as you can. And then kind of when you've done well, then do the good. But we're not, we're not designed to do that as humans. the thing I always love looking at is if you look at people's surnames. I love your surname, Judge. Do you come from a family of judges at some point in the past? I mean, if you look at names like Cooper, they were the people who made barrels. Fletcher is the person who made arrows. From a Western European perspective, we used to name ourselves after the contribution we made to the tribe or to the village, and so we're designed to contribute maximally to the outcome of our village or our mini community. And I think this is the thing to think about. Like, if your business was in a small tribe, and Gurmeet, you're going out to find some food, I'm repairing the house, and then we've got a third member of the tribe who he or she comes in, pours water on the fire that we've built together, and then throws all the food out and generally causes a bit of destruction. It's not long before you and me get together and go, dude, like, we don't want you in the tribe here because you're causing more damage than contributing to our general well-being. And I think that for me is the overall lens to think of in your business. Is like, if we were a small, if you were at a house party, are you the kind of guest that turns up with no beer, drinks everyone else's beer out of the fridge, eats the food, trashes the house and then leaves? Or do you bring more than you eat for yourself? Do you look after everyone else? Do you make sure, do you go and hand out some food for the host? This, it's just the way we're wired is to do good and to contribute, and that's where the real meaning in life is to know that what you're doing is. Yeah, so there's lots of complexity to unpack there.
No, that's a great perspective. I think a lot of business owners, they should look into that. Definitely, that the perspective you just shared as a great way of looking at it. What impact are you making? Definitely, a profit is a short-lived, as we talk about. And doing a good is a long-lived, right? Definitely. Totally. I see that on a daily. I happen to recruit a lot of younger people that are coming out of universities, colleges. Because I work in a tech field, and definitely a lot of people are hired. They came from universities and colleges, and I think one of the differences I see that when I'm interviewing new talent, they're looking for the meaning at work. It's a little bit different than a previous generation. They almost they're almost demanding that, hey, what do you think of that? So they want to know where you stand. They want to know where your values are. So they're kind of more demanding than the previous generation. So I already see that shifting in an academic level, that the people coming out of schools and universities.
But one of my favorite questions I ask in one of my workshops is, we're like I say, we're conditioned in business to think about money. If I asked you, so what company was listed number 4 on the NASDAQ in July 2015?
Nobody knows.
Nobody cares, And it's like, but you're kind of fighting to get to maybe number 20 or number 400. It's like, no one actually cares. But if I sort of say to you, name a brand that's like just made your life better or has done something, like there'll be probably a handful of brands or moments of truth that you've had with a brand or an organization where you go, actually, like, that sits with me, and it will be because they did something for you. And again, like, this is the thing we've been conditioned. It's like the metric is money, but it's not about that. It's about understanding. And even at the highest level, like, if you're employing people, well, that should be meaningful for you. And I hear that a lot from business owners. It's like, I feel good knowing that I'm helping these 20, 30, 100, 1,000 people pay their rent, pay their mortgage, like, and that is a contribution. But then you got to try and really tie it back to the thing that you're doing. Like, it's no good kind of having that level of contribution if your core product is actually maybe harming those same people in some other way. And this is the big mindset shift. And I think, again, an interesting metric for me was, we obviously, you guys had some lockdowns. We had lockdowns here in New Zealand, and fairly early on in the piece, the government kind of said, if you're an essential business, you get to stay operating. And it was amazing how many companies thought they were essential, who were told pretty quickly, no, we actually don't think that you're essential. And for me, that's a really interesting thing to ponder on, is if you didn't meet the essential, sort of like borderline as a business, when humanity really needed you, then what are you doing? Like, if you're not essential for humans, what are you doing? And I think that's an interesting question to put in your head.
No, definitely. You could be providing something to essential businesses, or maybe you not consider essential, maybe you could be doing something to essential, right? Exactly. That's another way of looking at it. Very interesting. Okay. So let's talk about your background, Tim. How did you get involved in a B Corp, and what got you interested, and talk about your journey?
Mate, so it can only be described as an early midlife crisis. The best way to get into a business. So yeah, I used to work selling medical devices. So I worked for large companies like Johnson and Johnson, what have you, and did that for about 10 years. I was pretty successful, had a pretty good time doing it. And then 2010, 2011 here in Christchurch, where I live, we had a massive sequence of earthquakes, like huge, like literally destroyed the town or the city. Still kind of being rebuilt. That's a whole different story. Government bureaucracy and, all that stuff and lack of funding. And then in 2012, my wife and I had our daughter. And over that kind of 2-year period, it basically experienced what's called in the clinical literature a subconscious awakening. So it's not uncommon, particularly for males, that also between that kind of 35 to 45 age group, you start thinking about your life. It's not uncommon that CEOs, leaders of a business will get to that kind of age group and go, hang on a minute, actually, what am I doing? Is it all worth it? And typically that might manifest in the divorce and the Porsche and some really poor life decision choices. Whereas actually what you need to do is go and luckily what I did was I went inside to work out, well, why am I, why have I had this moment? Why was I this other person who I was just chasing money? Like that's all I cared about. And again, that was like the background that I came from. So yeah, so I had this sort of early midlife crisis, went really, really deep on my own internal journey of like, who am I? Why am I who I am? Which kind of led me into this world of purpose and like, well, what is the meaning of life? It's I'm told it's to make as much money as possible, but that just doesn't seem to make any sense now that you've kind of seen this stuff. And so yeah, on that kind of journey of self-discovery, I found this B Corp movement. And like I say, back then there were 2 in New Zealand, about 12 to 1,500 globally. And I thought, well, maybe I have gone crazy because everyone I'm talking to is like, no, but dude, it's just about making money. Just get a job, earn lots of money. Like that's what it's all about. And it just wasn't gelling. And so, yeah, I found this kind of B Corp community and other, purpose-driven businesses who were like, yeah, you're right. It's not all about making money. Like, sure, money is an enabler, but having that sense of meaning, contribution, understanding the good that you're doing, connecting to the good that you're doing and generally doing more good, which is why I ended up calling the company Grow Good. Like that's where it's really at. And I think we've lost sight of that in pretty much every major religious belief system. It's do something bigger than you for the benefit of everyone else. Like that's kind of the baseline of most major religions, but we've kind of lost sight of that in the just chase money, it'll be great. Yeah, so connected to this B Corp, I basically realized that the first B Corp, number 1 in New Zealand, was in Christchurch. And so I sent Steve Arder an email. He's, I think he's actually flying back from Tahoe now. He's been in Tahoe, California for the last few years, setting up the business over there. Connected with him. And I was like, I've just stumbled across this B Corp thing. Could I come and have a cup of tea with you? And he's like, sure. And so we booked in, I think it was like a 45-minute meeting at his office. And I left 3 hours later, just, head blown. Wow. It's like, okay, there is this, there are other people who see that just chasing money doesn't end well. And so I just said, look, I just want to come and help. And so Steve was pretty active in trying to grow the movement, to try and find that third B Corp in New Zealand. And I was like, look, just let me help. Like, what can I do? And so he was running, movie nights and open days at his sort of his office. So they're Eagle Protect. They sell single-use disposable rubber gloves, but they're the world's only B Corp provider of PPE and rubber gloves and stuff. And so I just help him try and grow the movement, and then that connected me with the team at B Lab locally here in Australia, New Zealand. So for a few years, I was B Corp ambassador for New Zealand. So just going out, talking to anyone that would listen about B Corp. And then I kind of transitioned. So yeah, I left medical, ended up working for a firm of, property consultancy, basically selling quantity surveying, building surveying services, project management. So I was brought on as the general manager to try and help grow the South Island business. So we've got the North Island, South Island in New Zealand. Just realized it was quite boring. Didn't really, it's quite slow, methodical, whereas I'm a bit more like, let's just give it a go, see what happens. And did that for a little while, and then realized that wasn't for me. Thought I want to get into coaching and training as a bit of a career path, and managed to network my way into a job as a sales trainer for a company. And then unfortunately got made redundant from that company late 2015, and sort of said to my wife, look, if I really feel like I'm unemployable, with how I now see the world, I look at all the job ads and I just don't care. just don't care about working for. I interviewed for there's a company here called 2 Degrees. It's one of our big mobile telephone internet providers, and I got down to the final 2 for sales manager, and I walked out and I just thought, I just don't care about selling mobile phones. Really, I just do not care. And so I didn't get that job. And so, late 2015, I just said to my wife, look, I really want to give my own gig a go. I think, if I don't do it now, I won't do it, because I was probably mid-30s. We just had our daughter. It's like, now's as good a time as any. If I get into a job, I'm going to be 5 years down the line, and then it's not going to happen. So that was late 2015, and here we are.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
It's been a roller coaster.
No, it's it's a good work what you're doing. There's no better service than serving to other humans, right? You're taking care 100%. Of people. You're working and you're doing good in a world, man. There's nothing better than that. Definitely. Kudos to you that you made the switch, and definitely I think you've been spreading the good information around and helping people to sort of get certified.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate it.
Good stuff. So walk us through our audience. Where can they find more information? About you. I think you have a podcast as well. Where they can listen to all the content. So
So we've got our own podcast called the Be Better Podcast, where we focus on interviewing other B Corps. Most of them are our clients, just talking to them about why they did it, like what was the journey like, what have they got out of it, what have you. And we've also got some other sort of random purpose-driven people that we've interviewed over the past couple of years. If you can't find me on the internet's broken. I'm sure we'll get some links, but growgood.co is my website. If you look for Tim Jones, that B Corp bloke on LinkedIn, I will pop up. I don't think there's any other B Corp bloke in the world other than me. But I'm sure we can get some links in the show notes, what have you. But I think my big thing would be to say, look, if you just Google B Impact Assessment, create an account, just go and have a look, see what it's all about. Quite often we find people are quietly surprised as to how much good they are actually already doing. And they go, do you know what? Actually, we're not that far away from maybe being able to do this. So go and have a look, go and have a go.
Yeah, I'm going to include all the links below the video as well, so people can click a link and they can reach out to you. But hopefully with this conversation, we inspire some CEOs. If you're not thinking about a B Corp, at least you start thinking about it in terms of B Corps. And if you already committed, you want to pursue your journey with that and get a certified, then take a look at information on your team's website and connect with them. For conversation. I learned so much from our discussion. I'm sure anybody who connects with you, they're going to learn so much, and you're going to make the journey much easier than by themselves they're going through it. So definitely recommend go listen to your podcast, go reach out to you, have a conversation. But before we go, Tim, I want to thank you for your time and acknowledge all the good work you've been doing. You've been doing amazing work and you're helping a lot of people. So thank you so much for putting all the good work out.
Thanks, man. I appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much, Tim. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.